Welcome to the B2B Market Podcast. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the single largest customer in the country, the Government of Canada. The federal government spends about $37 billion per year, and as the central purchaser for the Government of Canada, PSPC manages the procurement of goods and services, including construction services, valued at approximately $27 billion annually. Joining us today is Dominic Laporte, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister of the Procurement Branch at Public Services and Procurement Canada, PSPC. Appointed in early 2024, Dominic brings a career rooted in fairness and transparency, with past leadership roles at the Treasury Board and the Canadian International Trade Tribunal. Today, he is at the helm of Canada's procurement transformation, focused on making the system more accessible for SMEs while strengthening our national supply chains. So let's dive right in. Dominic, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Very well, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast, SK.
It's always a pleasure to host, figures from different industries and from the government body as well. Dominic, you lead a branch that manages billions in contracts annually, affecting almost every industrial sector in Canada. What are your top procurement priorities to keep Canada competitive and resilient in 2026?
This is very timely in terms of question that you're asking. As you know, there's a lot of action happening in procurement. In the current context, the current situation, we want to leverage procurement as a lever to strengthen the Canadian economy. And public procurement accounts for 14% of the GDP. So it's a significant share of the Canadian economy. And every year, PSPC awards approximately $37 billion in contracts, covering, as you pointed out, various sectors of the Canadian economy. So our Prime Minister currently did announce a Buy Canadian policy on September 5th, and the policies came into force on December 16 of last year. So what we want to do with those policies is to become our best customer. We want to prioritize Canadian steel, aluminum, wood, and our procurement. So when we're buying, when the government is purchasing, we want to make sure that not only are we kind of helping out our various industry, but also that we're increasing the supply chain, the Canadian content of the supply chain. So I would say that one of our top priorities at PSPC these days is really to implement Buy Canadian, get in touch with our suppliers, explain how to enhance value in the supply chain. So this is basically, it's been keeping us quite busy lately.
Right. Now let's explore lowering barriers for SMEs in federal procurement, which is very, very important. What steps is PSPC taking to make federal procurement more accessible for Canadian SMEs?
Yeah, we do appreciate that. You're right. Procurement is not always easy to navigate, especially for small businesses. Large corporation, oftentimes they have a team dedicated to responding to bid. So we do appreciate that there's a lot that needs to be done on that front. We've already done a lot over the last few years. In 2018, we did launch the electronic procurement solution to make it much more easy to have access to the bids that are available by the federal government, by provincial government, also by municipal governments. So much more. We have 88,000 suppliers accounts. So a lot of work has been done, even trying also to standardize our clause. This is something that is happening too. But what we want to do is really leverage AI. We want to leverage more technology to make it easier for suppliers to find opportunities, to set, for example, alerts, reuse that information, and make basically bidding much more easy on government opportunity. For example, 2 weeks ago, we did launch our Procura chatbot, which will allow suppliers to have access to real 24/7 information on, for example, how to become a supplier, our latest opportunities, ask question in terms of the obligation that they have, question on the mandatory requirement. So this is something that we're testing at the moment, and we're going to be leveraging more and more of those tools. And we know for a business, they don't necessarily have the time to go through 25 pages of tender documents. So how can we streamline the documents, How could we use more common plain language? If you're a supplier, you want to know without having to go to 5, 10 pages, what is the opportunity? What can you bid on? Are you able to fulfill the requirement? So this is something that we're working on in terms of bringing more simple language to procurement. So I think digital opportunities offer a lot on that front. And this is why leveraging some of the tools and also building on new will go a long way. Also, as part of the Buy Canadian, government intend to launch a small procurement program for SMEs. So that's going to go a long way and helping also small business to be able to navigate. And we're going to be looking at simplifying even more procurement. So more to come on that front, but we are very much engaged on that. And we're looking forward to have more SMEs, more Canadian SMEs bidding on federal opportunities.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, simplifying the onboarding process and modernizing the digital procurement platform is vital for turning the government into partner that small businesses can actually navigate. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Now let's look at evolving evaluation models beyond price. What do suppliers misunderstand about how PSPC evaluates bids today?
Okay, and I think a common misunderstanding, and I think your question is right on, common misunderstanding that suppliers oftentimes made, especially new suppliers, is to think that contracts are won on price, and basically a strong technical solution is going to be good. So first we have to be mindful if you want to bid, it's first going to be won on strict compliance. If a bid does not meet every mandatory requirement, it's not going to be considered, regardless on how good the solution is that the bidder is proposing. So this is very unfortunate because sometimes we could have a wonderful technical solution, but for whatever reason, we have mandatory requirements that are not met. So I would say this is something to keep in mind. Suppliers also sometimes underestimate the importance of process discipline. Success depends on responding precisely to the evaluation criteria and making it easy for evaluator to assess your bid. It's just not what you say, it's how clearly and directly you align to what is being asked. And also, suppliers tend to sometimes underestimate how much policies, priorities shape outcome. Right now, I spoke about Buy Canadian. So right now, we're looking at supply chain. So if I am a supplier right now bidding on a federal opportunity, what I may be asked to do is to maximize the Canadian content. So demonstrate in my bid that I'm, for example, using Canadian steel or I'm providing Canadian content as part of my solution. So suppliers really need to pay attention to that. It could be also other social economic consideration that we are measuring. It could be, for example, greening requirement. It could be also indigenous consideration. So these are not nice to have. They are kind of fundamental consideration of the bid process. So this is something really to keep in mind when you're bidding on a government opportunity. Just to do a bit of a recap, make sure you pay attention to all the mandatory requirements. Make sure that when you answer a question about, for example, a requirement of the bid, that you're really addressing what is being asked. And lastly, the third point is be mindful in terms of those kind of social economic requirements where that can give you also additional points in terms of greening, in terms of also indigenous consideration or the Buy Canadian program right now.
Yeah, it's like understanding that value now includes social impact and indigenous reconciliation is the key for any supplier looking to win in the modern federal marketplace. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. To the B2B suppliers and manufacturers watching, in 2026, the government of Canada is more than just a buyer. It is a strategic partner in your growth. The federal government spends around $37 billion per year, and the central purchaser for the government of Canada, PSPC, manages the procurement of goods and services, including construction services, valued at approximately $27 billion annually. If you want to build a long-term relationship with these customers, you need to understand the social and economic impact of your bid. Visit canada.ca/procurement or use the Canada Buys platform to get your business ready. Don't just submit a proposal, align your business with the values Canada is buying for. Dominic, now let's explore protecting domestic industry through procurement strategy. How does PCSP balance taxpayer value with supporting Canadian industries?
Okay, so we're not looking for the lowest price. Oftentimes, the federal government, we're looking for best value, and best value is not defined as the lowest price. We have, for example, some commodity goods that it's going to be basically one on price. But I would say for most procurement these days, we're going to be looking at additional factor. I spoke about, for example, Buy Canadian. We're also looking at digital sovereignty. For example, if you're going to be bidding on an IT digital opportunity, you're going to be dealing with requirements, for example, to make sure that data are being housed in Canada. So that's going to be a requirement. When it comes to greening, also, this is something that, it forms part of the best value when we choose to buy. The federal government also tend to set also the trends for the private sector. So oftentimes we're going to be introducing criteria that may be also adopted down the road. So this is very important to be mindful of that. So it's not, I think one of the biggest maybe misunderstanding is to think that you're going to be winning federal procurement based on price only. This is not the case. What suppliers should be aiming for is to build that long-term relationship with the government and also see where the government is going in terms of social consideration. That is also key. That may shift, that may evolve with the priorities of the government. So things have changed a lot since we did introduce the Buy Canadian agenda, really requiring much more Canadian content. Things will continue to evolve. So I would tell supplier, stay alert on what are those social priorities, and also make sure that when you're bidding, you're mindful of that. So it's not necessarily one on the lowest price, but really best value, where we take into account a lot of factors, a lot of consideration, social procurement, the fact that we are also looking at SMEs. Those are all important consideration.
Leveraging procurement as a tool for economic policy ensures that taxpayer dollars not only buys goods but also build national capability and high quality jobs. Dominic, finally, let's look at the future of federal supplier relationship. How will government and supplier relationships evolve and procurement transforms?
Yes. So I think it's for suppliers, it's to see the federal government looking at a bid not as a transaction. If I were to look at the relationship that we want to build with our suppliers, we need competition. We need healthy competition. Oftentimes, the worst case scenario for myself and my role and my position is to have no bid or one single bid. So what we want to do is encourage more people to bid on federal opportunity. And I know that sometimes it can also be discouraging. You invest a lot of time to fill out a bid, and maybe you're not successful that time around. So be mindful of not necessarily looking for a quick win. Get to know, for example, which opportunities, which department are sourcing the goods or the services that you're offering. Quality is so important. So that also long-term relationship that you're going to be building with the client department will also go a long way. Reliability of the supply that you provide, either goods or for services, that goes a long way. So those are things that will make sure that you build a long-term successful relationship. And we're also moving more and more to introduce what we call vendor performance management. What we want to do is reward our best suppliers, the one who delivers on time, on budget, quality, reliable suppliers, and make sure that these suppliers keep winning opportunity and that they build that track record. So we're going to be introducing that, and we started to do that where for some contract where PSPC, where our department is the buyers, and that's going to be also expanded to other departments. So eventually, I think in a few years from now, each suppliers will have a running score, and the higher that score is, the more opportunities they're going to have to win over and over again. So see that as a long-term relationship, and I think it's going to pay off a lot.
Before we wrap up, Dominic, what is one key piece of advice for businesses building long-term government partnerships?
Yeah, that's okay. I would say, first off, see where the federal government is going. We spoke about Buy Canadian. Right now, this is a top priority. So be mindful of that. And I did refer to that. Don't see that as one transaction. So don't get discouraged if you're not winning on a particular bid. You can also request a debrief. If you were not successful, talk to basically a procurement officer. There's a process by which you can avail yourself and request more information to make sure that maybe next time around you improve your odds of being successful. So that is key. So other tips that I would give also is to make sure that you subscribe to the alert that will notify you of new procurement opportunities. So there's not a single tip, but I think though the more kind of accustomed you get to federal opportunities, the more familiar you see, you're going to be able to demystify procurement and win more opportunities.
Thank you, Dominic, for sharing your advice with our small business owner. That was Dominic Laporte from Public Services and Procurement Canada. A masterclass in navigating the federal market, the reality of inclusive procurement, and why Canadian economic sovereignty starts with the contracts we sign today. Thank you for tuning into the B2B Market Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and visit b2bmarketinsights.com for more resources.